Hello friends, today we are discussing about concept of democracy. Okay, ignore my writing. Concept of democracy. This is very important for your optional political science and international relationship. We are going to see what are the models of democracy, what is democracy, types of democracy, waves of democracy, and, globalization, impact on democracy, and theories of democracy, etc. etc. We are going to cover all the concepts of democracy in this chapter. So we will start. So what are the models of democracy? We are going to discuss as the participative democracy. What are the models? There are two models. There are participative democracy and another one is deliberative democracy. Deliberative democracy. These two models are there. First, basic things. As we know, what are the democracy? Democracy is government of the people, by the people, for the people. Okay, this is the basic concept of democracy. And in the basic terms, in another, what is democracy? Value system as a person. There is a freedom, equality, tolerance, fraternity. These are the way of life of a democracy. Okay, so in another sense, what are the types of democracy we are going to discuss? There are two types. One is procedural democracy. Procedural. And another one is substantive. Substantive democracy. Okay, so in this procedural democracy, this is the independent judiciary and free and fair election. This is independent of judiciary, free and fair election. And this substantive is the fundamental judiciary, and this is the part of life which is the basic. What are the basics of democracy which are covered in the substantive democracy? Basics like democracy is a part of life and culture in this substantive democracy. That's what is democracy means here. Here is discussed about the waves of democracy and in this globe on this earth. The first wave of democracy is 17th century. 17th century. What is that? In the 17th century, UK, France. Okay, there was the wave of democracy, as you know, the France Revolution and etc. 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 That's a first wave of democracy. Another one is first reverse wave of democracy. First reverse wave of democracy. In this 1999. Okay, that's a Germany, Italy, collapse of democracy. First World War. Germany and Italy. Okay, that was the first World War. There was a collapse of democracy at this time. Okay, then another one is second wave of democracy. What is that? Second wave of democracy. Second wave. What is that second wave? That's a in Germany and Italy. It's also in Germany and Italy. There was a second wave of democracy 1945 to 1991. After the World War II, there was a second wave of democracy in Germany and Italy. After the Hitler, Nazi and all that incident, there was a second wave of democracy in Germany and Italy. Then second reverse wave. What is second reverse wave? Second reverse wave. That's a post 1991, after the Cold War. Post 1991, after the Cold War, Eastern communist countries became democratic. Eastern communist countries became democratic. Then, as we know, there was also fourth wave of democracy. That's Arab Spring. Arab Spring. Fourth, that is Arab Spring. Arab Spring is like there was a huge masses are demanding for democracy in the Arab countries. Then why democracy is needed in India? Why in India? Why democracy is needed in India. Okay, the first one is like colonial legacy was there in India. That's why we have a sentiment of democracy. Colonial legacy we had. Then another one is freedom movement based on civil rights. Based on civil right, freedom, that whatever freedom movements we had, that was on based on the civil rights. We gave importance to the public liberty, rights to public. Then another, choice of leadership, that we decided what we want. Choice of leadership. Okay, and then what is the next one? Sense of constituent assembly and the role of caste, reason for mobilization of a people. That's why democracy is successful in India. That's why democracy is successful in India. Then what is the difference between globalization and democracy? Okay, so globalization, as we know, it is a borderless world, interdependence. Democracy is empowerment of masses. So analysis of whether globalization strengthen the masses and positive points of globalization. What are the positive points of globalization on democracy? Such like environment movements are there going on. Okay, environment movements. The Black Lives Matter movement recently held. It was all over the globe, at least in USA, and then it was on social media campaign like Black Lives Matter. Then Me Too movement, that was a global movement for women. Use of technology to strengthen the voice of masses and against evil in the society. That's another, globalization and democracy. Then what are the negative points of globalization? What are the negative points of globalization on democracy? So as we know, the globalization has strengthened the rich. There is a conception that globalization is profited only to the rich, not to the poor. Not to the poor. Poor are marginalized by the globalization. That's increased interest and intrastate disparities. The globalization increased interstate and disparities. It hasn't benefited masses. That poor are the masses of the world, and that doesn't benefited the masses. Affected social economic rights of poor. This globalization affected social and economic rights of poor. Okay, economic rights of poor, and that's it. That how globalization impacted the democracy and why is implications of democracy. That's all. That first is what are the positive points on globalization, that how it has benefited the democracy, like environmental movement across the globe. Okay, various movements that are across the globe that strengthen the masses and all this. But another negative points are also that's only benefited the rich, not to the poor, and that increase the disparities. Then here is the cosmopolitan model of democracy. It is cosmopolitan model of democracy. Cosmopolitan means global citizenship. As we know, there are many institutions, many global institutions like IMF, International Monetary Fund, World Bank, United Nations, WTO. These are the world institutions. There is a conception that these are suffering from democracy deficit. What is this democracy deficit? Deficit. This democracy deficit is the lack of representativeness and transparency. What is this? Lack of transparency. Lack of transparency. Accountability. Okay, accountability. That's what is democracy deficit. At present, organizations democratically elected in nation state. What is that? At present, there are organizations which are elected by democratically elected, that is, there is only organization which is democratically elected, that is a nation state. Democratically elected nation state. Okay. Then there are the solutions which are given by the David Held. Solutions given by David Held. What solutions that he gave? Right. David Held. That's a establishment of world government. Establishment of world government. Reforms of UN. Reforms of UN Security Council. Rather, reforms of UN Security Council. Reforms in UN, bringing transparency and accountability, strengthening the grassroots strengthening. Then independence of democracy, greater freedom of press, greater freedom to press. So these are some points that are given by David Held. Then Joseph Stiglitz in his book Making Globalization Work emphasized on necessity of reforming institutions of global governance. That Joseph, these are important names and you should remember that while quoting this, all the statements. Joseph Stiglitz. Okay, this is in his Making Globalization. His book is Making Globalization. Okay, what he emphasized, reforming institution of global governance, reforming institutions of global governance, reforming. What institutions are these global governance institutions? Like IMF, World Bank, etc., as we discussed earlier. So this is it. In the next lecture we will discuss about the theories, then Macpherson's theory, Robert Dahl theory, models of democracy. What are the different models of democracy, like representative democracy? Okay, what are the dilemmas of representative, rational, deliberative democracy? We will discuss in depth. So this is the first part of this democracy lecture, and we will continue it. So thanks for watching this video and support me, guys. Do subscribe my channel. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you, friends.